You are not a king. You are not a noble nor a soldier in the Emperor's guard. You are a stonemason's apprentice, standing in the sweltering piazza of Verona in the year of our Lord 924, and the world is about to pivot on the point of a dagger. The air is thick, not just with the summer heat rising from the flagstones and the stench of the Adige, but with a tension that has coiled in the guts of Italy for a lifetime. This is a kingdom of knives, a fractured inheritance of Charlemagne where loyalty is a commodity and power is rented, never owned. The man the crowd watches is Berengar, King of Italy, recently crowned emperor by Pope John X. To you, he looks old. His face is a roadmap of forgotten campaigns and broken oaths. His beard more grey than fair. He is a survivor of a brutal game. He has fought off Louis of Provence, wrestled with Rudolph of Burgundy, and paid tribute to the Magyar horsemen who burn villages a day's ride from these very walls. His reign is a testament to stubborn persistence, not absolute power, and everyone knows it. The great lords, the Lamberts, the Marquises of Ivrea, even his own son-in-law, Adalbert, whisper in shadowed courtyards. They see him as a temporary obstacle, a placeholder on the throne until a more suitable candidate, one more pliable to their ambitions, can be found. He is speaking from the steps of the Basilica of San Zeno, his voice raspy but carrying over the shuffling crowd. He speaks of unity, of repelling the Saracens from the south and the Magyars from the east. He speaks of a regnum Italicum, a kingdom of Italy that is more than a squabbling collection of ducal fiefdoms. You have heard these words before. They are the hollow refrains of every weak king who has ever tried to rule this peninsula. You look at the faces of the Veronese nobles standing near the Emperor Milo, the city's count, and Flambert, the Chief Justice. Their expressions are stone, their piety a mask. You have seen them ride through the city with their retinues, proud and dangerous men who bend the knee to Berengar but serve only themselves. The moment comes, not with a trumpet's blast, but with a subtle shift in the crowd. A man, unremarkable in a dusty tunic, pushes forward. He is just one of many petitioners, perhaps, or a zealot overcome by the emperor's presence. No one pays him much mind until he is too close. The movement is a blur. Sunlight glints on polished steel. This is it. The whispered conspiracy made flesh. The dagger's arc is swift, aimed for the space between the emperor's ribs. But this is where history holds its breath, and then exhales down a different path. In our world, the blade found its mark. Berengar fell, his dream of a consolidated Italian kingdom bleeding out onto the stones, leaving a power vacuum that would suck the German kings south over the Alps for the next 800 years. Not here. Not today. A man you recognize, Rickfried, a Frankish guard captain, loyal to Berengar since the bloody days against the Spolitans, steps forward. It is not a calculated act of heroism, it is instinct. A lifetime of military discipline culminating in a single reflexive motion. He intercepts the assassin, not with his sword, but with his body. The dagger, intended for the emperor, sinks deep into Rickfried's side. The guard grunts, a sound of surprise and finality, and slumps to the ground. For a heartbeat, the piazza is silent, a frozen tableau of shock. The assassin, his weapon now stuck, stares with wide eyes. Berengar, his face splattered with the blood of his most loyal captain, does not flinch. The old man, the survivor, is gone. In his place stands an emperor forged in the instant of his own near death. His voice, when it comes, is not a shout but a low, terrifying growl that cuts through the stunned silence. Seize him! The Imperial guards, shaken from their stupor, descend upon the assassin. The well-dressed nobles, who a moment ago were watching with veiled anticipation, are now the first to cry for the traitor's head. But Berengar's eyes are not on the captured man. They are fixed, with a terrifying clarity, on Milo of Verona and the circle of local magnates. He sees the flicker of panic in their eyes, the instant evaporation of their conspiratorial arrogance. He knows. He has always known who his true enemies were, but he has never had the strength or the excuse to act. Now, he has both. The blood of a loyal martyr is a more potent weapon than any army. The days that follow are not a trial, they are a purge. The assassin, under torture that is both methodical and public, screams the names you already suspected: Flambert, Milo, and a dozen other Veronese landowners and knights who plotted to replace Berengar with Rudolf of Burgundy. There is no appeal to feudal rights, no negotiation for ransom. Berengar has passed a threshold. The Verona Gambit has failed, and the price is absolute. You watch from the rooftops as the hangman works from dawn until dusk. The conspirators are not given the dignity of a sword. They are strung up from the city walls, a grim warning to any carrion birds and any ambitious dukes who might be watching. Their lands, their titles, their fortunes, all are declared forfeit to the imperial crown. This is not merely punishment, it is a fundamental restructuring of power. For decades, the kings of Italy have been forced to bargain with these regional strongmen. Berengar, in a single, blood-soaked week, eradicates the opposition in one of northern Italy's most powerful cities and seizes their assets directly. The news travels on horseback, carried by merchants and messengers, and it lands like a thunderclap in the courts of Ivrea, Spoleto, and Tuscany. The great lords who had been weighing their options, preparing to welcome the Burgundian pretender, now pause. The old, predictable Berengar is dead. This new emperor is acting with the brutal certainty of a true Roman autocrat. He is not just defending his crown, he is forging a state. With the wealth of the Veronese conspirators, Berengar does something revolutionary. He does not simply grant the lands to new favourites who might one day betray him in turn. He retains a vast portion as direct imperial domain and uses the income to pay his soldiers. He hires mercenaries not with promises of future plunder, but with cold, hard silver. He begins a systematic program of fortifying the Alpine passes and the Po Valley, not under the authority of local lords, but under the command of imperial officers loyal only to him. When Rudolf of Burgundy finally crosses the Alps, he does not find a welcoming party of rebellious Italian nobles. He finds a disciplined, paid army waiting for him near Pavia. He finds the gates of the cities locked, their walls manned by soldiers who fear the emperor's wrath more than they covet a Burgundian's promises. The rebellion, which in our timeline toppled a king, dissolves before it can even begin. Rudolf retreats, humiliated, his Italian ambitions shattered forever. You, the stonemason's apprentice, see the change in the very stones of your city. You are put to work, not on a new chapel for a vainglorious bishop, but on the city's outer walls, making them thicker, higher. The designs are not local. They are sent from the emperor's chief engineer in Pavia, based on old Roman principles of military architecture. You are paid a wage in silver coins stamped with the emperor's profile, money that comes from the confiscated estates of the men who once ruled your city. An ethical tension hangs in the air, unspoken but felt by all. The order is real. The peace is real. The threat of Magyar raids recedes as imperial patrols become a common sight. But the foundation of this new order is terror. The justice is swift and merciless. The old feudal world of reciprocal obligations, however chaotic, has been replaced by the iron fist of a centralized state. You are safer, but you are less free. The emperor's peace is the peace of the wolf in the sheepfold. The final piece of the puzzle falls into place a year later. Berengar, at the head of his new army, marches south. He is not responding to a crisis. He is creating one. He moves through Tuscany and into the Duchy of Spoleto, his progress less a military campaign and more a triumphal procession. The lords who once defied him now rush to swear fealty, offering him tribute and hostages. They have seen what happened in Verona. They know the game has changed. The Iron Crown of Lombardy, for the first time in a century, rests on a head that cannot be so easily removed. The emperor is no longer the first among equals, reliant on the shifting loyalties of a rapacious aristocracy. He is the state. His survival has not just preserved his life, it has annihilated the political structure of 9th century Italy. In its place, something new and something terrifyingly old is being born. A Roman Empire, ruled not from Aachen or Constantinople, but from Italy. An empire whose first and most profound challenge will not come from across the Alps, but from the very heart of Rome itself. From the man who wears the fisherman's ring. You are no longer an apprentice shaping stone. Your hands are now stained with ink. You are a junior scribe in the Lateran palace, a minor cog in the vast, creaking machinery of the papal chancery. The air you breathe is a heady mix of old parchment, melting wax, and the low murmur of prayer and politics that seeps from the very walls of Rome. For months, the talk has not been of theology, but of Verona. Every traveller, every pilgrim, every merchant brings fresh tales of the Emperor Berengar, of the hanged nobles, the seized lands, the paid soldiers, the chilling new efficiency of power in the north. Here in Rome, the news is received with a studied indifference that conceals a knot of terror. This is the city of the Theophylacti, of the great consul Theophylact, his powerful wife Theodora, and their formidable daughter Marozia. They are the true masters of Rome. They install popes and depose them. Their armed retinues are more immediate source of authority than any distant emperor. Pope John X, the man you serve, owes his tiara to their patronage. He is a vigorous, intelligent man, a fighter who personally led armies against the Saracens. But he is a player in their game, and he knows it. The illusion of control shatters on a Tuesday in spring. An imperial legate arrives, not at the head of a conquering army, but with a small, immaculate honour guard and a scroll sealed in purple wax. He does not demand entry. He requests an audience. His deference is absolute, his courtesy flawless. It is this very politeness that is so unnerving. It is the courtesy of a cat to a cornered mouse. You are in the audience hall, holding the Pope's inkwell, when the message is read. The Emperor Berengar, forever grateful to His Holiness for the imperial crown, and for his prayers which surely shielded him from the assassin's dagger, invites the Bishop of Rome to the city of Pavia. There will be a great synod, a celebration of their shared victory over the forces of chaos. They will discuss, as father and son, the glorious future of the Christian faith in a pacified and united Imperium Italicum. It is not a request, it is a summons. Every canon lawyer in the Lateran understands the terrifying precedent. The Pope does not travel to the Emperor. The Emperor comes to Rome to be crowned, to kneel, to receive legitimacy. To go to Pavia is to reverse a flow of power that has been accepted for over a century. Pope John argues. He cites his health, the dangers of the road, the pressing pastoral needs of his flock. The legate listens patiently, his smile never wavering, and then gently repeats the invitation. The imperial army, he adds, has already secured the entire route. The Pope's safety is the Emperor's highest priority. There is no choice. To refuse is to openly declare the emperor an enemy, and John X knows he no longer has the allies to fight that war. The great lords of Spoleto and Tuscany have bent the knee. The Roman nobility is watching, waiting to see which way the wind blows. A week later, the papal procession departs Rome. The journey north is a masterpiece of political theatre. You ride in the baggage train, watching the spectacle unfold. This is not the flight of a captive, it is a triumphal march. In every town and village, crowds line the road, cheering, waving olive branches. Banners with the keys of St. Peter fly alongside the imperial eagle. The honour guard is not a jailer's escort. It is a magnificent display of imperial power, their armour polished to a mirror shine. But you see the truth. The crowds are too organised, their cheers too uniform. The imperial soldiers are courteous, but they are everywhere. Their discipline, a silent, unbreachable wall. This is a cage, and it is being gilded before your very eyes. Pavia is a revelation. It is no longer the dusty Lombard capital of old. It is a city being reborn. Stonemasons, perhaps even men like the boy you were in Verona, are everywhere, working not on churches, but on aqueducts, forums, and a vast new imperial palace built of brick and salvaged Roman marble. This is a capital meant to rival not Aachen, but Constantinople. It speaks of permanence, of order, of a power that is civil, not just military. The meeting between Pope and Emperor takes place in the half-finished Basilica Berengar is sponsoring. The Emperor does not wait on his throne. He meets the Pope at the door, kneels, and kisses the fisherman's ring. He defers to him in every public gesture, seating him on a higher chair, asking for his blessing before he speaks. He lavishes praise upon John X, calling him the spiritual father of the empire, the co-author of this new golden age. And then, in private council, with only a few trusted advisers present, the iron hand emerges from the velvet glove. Berengar lays out his vision. The church is the soul of the empire, and the emperor is its sword and shield. To protect that soul, the sword must have absolute authority. He speaks of the shame of the past century, the saeculum obscurum, when the See of Peter was a plaything of corrupt Roman families. He speaks of popes murdered, of papal elections decided by the swords of aristocratic thugs. This cannot stand, Berengar says, his voice calm and reasonable. The spiritual authority of Rome must be beyond question, pure and unsullied, and I, as emperor, will make it so. He proposes a new concordat, a series of imperial edicts for the protection and sanctity of the Holy See. First, the emperor guarantees the territorial integrity of the lands of St. Peter. No foreign army, no rebellious lord, no Roman baron will ever threaten the Pope again. Imperial garrisons will be established in key cities, including Rome itself, to ensure this peace. Second, the emperor will generously fund the church, rebuilding derelict monasteries, endowing new cathedrals, and ensuring that the clergy is paid from the imperial treasury, freeing them from reliance on grasping local patrons. Third, and last, to ensure that the papal office is never again captured by base, worldly men, every future papal election must receive the formal assent of the emperor before the candidate can be consecrated. The emperor, as the anointed protector of the faith, will have the sacred duty to ensure that only the most pious and worthy man ascends to the throne of St. Peter. You watch Pope John's face as he listens. He is a skilled diplomat, but you can see the blood drain from his cheeks. He understands every implication. The offer of protection is an assertion of control. The offer of funding is the establishment of dependency, and the right of assent over his successors is the final, killing blow. It is the end of an independent papacy. It makes the Pope the highest-ranking cleric in the imperial bureaucracy. He will be the Patriarch of the West, but a patriarch in the model of Constantinople, ultimately subordinate to the temporal ruler. The ethical dilemma is profound. A poison served in a golden chalice. Berengar is not wrong. The papacy has been a cesspool of corruption, controlled by the very families he now promises to crush. His reforms would, in fact, purify the church. They would end the pornocracy, enforce clerical discipline, and restore a measure of dignity to the office. But the price of this forced purity is freedom. The church will be holier, but it will no longer be a universal power broker. It will be a national church, the state religion of the Italian Empire. The epic struggle between Pope and Emperor that will define the next 2 centuries of our history, the Investiture Controversy, is strangled in its cradle. There will be no Canossa, no Pope bringing an emperor to his knees. There is only Pavia. John X, a man who has led armies, a man of immense personal courage, does the only thing he can. He yields. He signs the Concordat. When you return to Rome, the city is transformed. The banners of the Theophylacti are gone. An imperial prefect sits in the forum, dispensing justice under a gilded statue of Berengar. Imperial soldiers, quiet and disciplined, patrol the streets. The Pope is celebrated as never before. His sermons are distributed by imperial decree. When he presides over Mass at the Lateran, the Emperor's representative is always in the front pew, kneeling devoutly. The Pope is now a holy symbol, a source of immense spiritual legitimacy for the new imperial order. He is honoured, revered, and utterly powerless. The cage is locked. It is beautiful. It is safe. And from within it, the Pope can only watch as the history of Christendom begins to flow down a new, imperial-controlled channel, a river whose course is charted not in Rome, but in Pavia. You are no longer in Italy. The scent of olive groves and ancient marble is gone, replaced by the damp chill of the north, the smell of wood smoke, pine forests, and wet earth. You are standing in the great hall of Duke Heinrich of Saxony, in his fortress at Quedlinburg. The year is 935. You are a ministerialis, one of the unfree knights who form the backbone of the Duke's household, and you are watching the future of a people unravel before it has even been woven. The hall is a cavern of timber and shadow, torches sputtering against the deep gloom. The air is thick with the smell of roasted boar and spilled ale. At the high table sits the Duke. He is not called Henry the Fowler here. That name was a small, almost mocking title given him by his Franconian rivals. Here, he is simply Heinrich, the Herzog, the war leader of the Saxon people, a man whose authority is written in the scars on his hands and the weary set of his jaw. He is the most powerful man north of the Alps. But you are beginning to understand how little that means. In this hall are gathered the great men of the eastern Frankish lands. Eberhard, the proud and hot-tempered Duke of Franconia, Arnulf the Bad, the rapacious Duke of Bavaria, who plunders church lands with impunity. Burchard of Swabia, a man who plays a subtle game, his loyalty always for sale. In another world, these men, or their sons, would be the pillars of a new empire. They would be the princes of a German kingdom, united under Heinrich's son, Otto, bound by a common ambition to claim the ultimate prize, the imperial crown in Rome. That world feels like a distant fantasy here. The news from Italy, which arrives in trickles via travelling monks and merchants, speaks of a different reality. It speaks of the Emperor Berengar, now an old but unshakable titan. It speaks of paved roads, of unified law, of a pope who is the emperor's chief cleric. It speaks of an Imperium Romanum that is not a memory to be resurrected, but a living, breathing power south of the Alps. The prize has already been claimed. The game is over before it even began. And so, the purpose of this gathering is not to forge a kingdom, but to pick at the seams of a dying one. There is no talk of a united front. Eberhard of Franconia demands the return of a border fortress that Heinrich's men seized. Arnulf of Bavaria, his lands bordering the eastern chaos, wants Saxon silver to help him fight off Magyar raiders, but offers no soldiers in return. They do not call Heinrich my king, they call him cousin or brother, the titles of equals, and their every word is a negotiation, a thinly veiled threat. The legacy of Charlemagne has curdled. The vast eastern realm has no centre, no gravitational pull. It is collapsing into its constituent parts, the old tribal duchies. Saxony for the Saxons, Bavaria for the Bavarians. The inertia is palpable. Without the grand unifying project of marching on Italy, of seizing the Iron Crown of Lombardy, and then the imperial dignity itself, there is nothing to bind these men together. The imperial ambition was the fire that could have forged these disparate tribes into a single blade. Without it, they are just chunks of raw, competing ore. The title of King of East Francia, which Heinrich technically holds, is a ghost at the feast. It confers no real authority, commands no loyalty beyond his own Saxon borders. It is a memory of a unity that no longer serves anyone's interests. You see the consequences etched on the faces of the common people. A month ago, you rode with a patrol to the Thuringian border. You saw the burned villages, the fields gone to weed, the Magyars. In our history, Heinrich's son, Otto, would rally an army drawn from all the German duchies and crush them at the Battle of Lechfeld in 955, a victory so decisive it would birth a nation's identity. That will not happen here. Last year, when the Magyar host swarmed over the plains, there was no united army. Duke Heinrich led his Saxon levies and fought them to a standstill on the Unstrut River, a bloody, desperate affair. But while Saxons died, Arnulf of Bavaria was making his own separate peace with the raiders, offering them tribute and free passage through his lands to attack the Swabians. Eberhard of Franconia hoarded his soldiers, guarding his own borders, content to watch his rivals bleed. Each duchy is an island, defending its own shores, while the sea of chaos laps at them all. There can be no Lechfeld, because there is no Germany to defend. The twist is a slow, creeping one. It is not a dramatic collapse, but a gradual drifting apart. You see it in the minting of coins. 10 years ago, the silver pennies bore the crude profile of the king. Now, the coins that cross your palm are stamped with the boar of Bavaria or the lion of Swabia. You hear it in the law. A thief caught in Saxony is judged by Saxon law, but if he crosses the river into Franconia, the law is different, enforced by a different duke's men. The realm is dissolving into a patchwork of personal domains. The dukes are becoming kings in all but name, their duchies evolving into independent, rivalrous kingdoms. The ethical tension lies in the very nature of this new reality. A visiting Benedictine monk, a man of learning from the great abbey of Fulda, laments this fragmentation. He speaks of the sin of pride, of how the great lords are sacrificing the unity of Christendom for their own petty ambitions. He sees only chaos, weakness, and the failure of a grand Christian design. To him, the order and power of the Italian Empire to the south is a shining example of what has been lost here. But then you speak to an old Saxon warrior, a man who fought beside Heinrich since they were both young. He spits on the ground when he hears the monk's words. Unity? He grunts. The unity of the Frankish whip. We are Saxons. We follow our duke. Why should my son die to defend a Franconian pig who hates him? Why should our silver go to a Bavarian who would sell us to the heathens for a new horse? For him, this fragmentation is not a failure. It is liberation. It is the return to a truer, older way of life, where loyalty is personal, to a man, to a tribe, not to a distant, abstract crown. He has no desire to be a cog in an imperial machine, whether its master is a Frank, a Saxon, or an Italian. The end comes not with a bang, but with a quiet, final act of dissolution. The next year, in 936, Duke Heinrich dies. His body is laid to rest here in Quedlinburg. In our history, his son Otto would be swiftly elected and crowned king at Aachen, the symbolic heart of the old Carolingian Empire, a clear statement of continuity and ambition. Here there is no coronation. There is not even an election. When Otto, a strong and capable warrior like his father, sends emissaries to the other dukes demanding they acknowledge him as king, the replies are polite but firm refusals. Eberhard of Franconia declares himself king in his own lands. Arnulf of Bavaria, already a de facto sovereign, simply ignores the request. The fiction of the Kingdom of East Francia is over. Otto is the Duke of Saxony. Nothing more. He has his father's lands, his father's army, but the phantom crown has evaporated. You stand on the walls of Quedlinburg, looking south. The road no longer leads to a unified realm. It leads to Franconia, a foreign country. Beyond that, Swabia. Beyond that, Bavaria. And far beyond them all, over the towering, impassable wall of the Alps, lies the empire. It is a concept that no longer belongs to you. The men north of the Alps are now just barbarians at the gates of a new and formidable Roman world. The destiny of this land is not to be a heart of Europe, but a fractured, violent periphery. The crown of Germany was never forged, its pieces left to rust in the dark forests of the north. You are a man of God, but your God is a God of order, of hierarchy, of straight lines on a parchment map. You are Fulbert, a clerk in the service of Hugh, the newly crowned king of the Franks, and you are standing in a draughty hall in the royal palace on the Ile de la Cité. The year is 987. The title, King of the Franks, is a grand inheritance, a cloak of Charlemagne worn by a man whose actual authority barely extends beyond the horizon you can see from the palace's highest tower. Paris is his, and the lands to Orléans. Beyond that lies a tapestry of duchies and counties, whose lords pay you lip service, but wield the real power of the sword and the soil. Your new king, Hugh Capet, is a patient, pragmatic man. He is Duke of the Franks, the most powerful of the great lords, but even he was chosen king as a matter of convenience by his peers. They believe him to be manageable. You watch him at his council table, a simple affair of oak planks laid over trestles. He is not surrounded by the great magnates of the realm, the Duke of Normandy, the Count of Blois, the Master of Aquitaine. They are conspicuously absent, secure in their own domains. Instead, he is surrounded by men like you, clerks, bishops, and minor barons, whose fortunes are tied directly to his. The conversation is not about grand strategy, not about imperial politics or the fate of Christendom. In another world, this king would be anxiously glancing east across the Rhine. He would be measuring his strength against the immense power of the Ottonian emperors, a sprawling German Reich that laid claim to Lotharingia and pressed upon the borders of Burgundy. His every move would be constrained by the threat of this colossal neighbour, forcing him into alliances with his own unruly vassals just to survive. But that Reich does not exist. The reports that trickle into your scriptorium from across the Rhine are a litany of chaos. The Duke of Saxony wars with the King of the Poles over the Slavic marches. The Bavarian Duke hires Italian mercenaries to fight the Franconians over a disputed river toll. They call themselves kings now, these dukes. But their kingdoms are little more than armed camps. They are a threat to each other. But they are no threat to you. They are a fractured, inward-looking rabble, a political buffer of endless petty conflict. And this absence, this gaping hole where an empire should be, is the single greatest asset King Hugh possesses. It is a silent, invisible ally. It means he can turn his back on the Rhine and face his true challenge: France itself. The topic at council today is Thibaut the Trickster, the Count of Blois. He has illegally constructed a castle overlooking the king's own lands near Montlhéry. In our timeline, a French king would have to cajole, threaten, and bargain, perhaps even appealing to the German emperor to mediate, his weakness on full display. King Hugh does not bargain. He looks at the Bishop of Laon, a shrewd man whose diocese has been plagued by Thibaut's men. "Your Grace," the king says, his voice quiet but devoid of doubt, "you will excommunicate the Count and all who serve him, declare his castle a den of thieves, an offence against God and the king's peace." He then turns to his constable. "Gather the host of the royal domain. We will tear that fortress down to the last stone." This is the new logic of power. With no external threat, the king can afford to make no compromises internally. He is not a mediator. He is a sovereign. He uses the church not as an equal partner, but as an instrument of royal policy. And this is the unexpected twist. The very weakness of the papacy in Rome works to his advantage. The Pope, a creature of the Italian emperor in Pavia, has little moral or political authority this far north. When French bishops are faced with a choice between a distant, Italian-dominated pope and a present, powerful king who offers them land, protection, and a share in his growing power, they choose the king. You are witnessing the birth of a Gallican church, a French church loyal first and foremost to the French crown, centuries ahead of schedule. You ride with the king's army. It is not a grand force, but it is disciplined, and it fights with a singular purpose. The castle falls in a month. Thibaut of Blois, excommunicated and facing rebellion from his own lesser vassals who fear the king's wrath, is forced into a humiliating submission. He does not just surrender. He cedes the disputed lands directly to the crown and pays a massive indemnity. The royal domain has grown. The king's authority is no longer just a theory written on parchment. It is a reality enforced with siege engines and cold steel. This becomes the template. Year after year, the strategy is repeated. A dispute between two minor lords becomes an opportunity for royal intervention. An appeal to the king's justice is answered by the king's army. The slow, patient work of centralization, which in our history took 300 years of Capetian rule to achieve, is being accomplished in a single generation. The king's law, administered by royal judges sent out from Paris, begins to supersede the patchwork of feudal custom. The king's coin becomes the standard for trade. The ethical tension is one you grapple with in late-night theological debates. You are bringing order to a violent land. You are replacing the arbitrary cruelty of 1,000 petty lords with a single predictable system of royal justice. Is this not God's work? And yet, you are also destroying a world. The ancient rights of the nobility, their freedom to rule their own lands as they see fit, are being systematically dismantled. The king's peace is a peace of submission. To build the state, you must first break the men who believe the land is theirs by right of blood and conquest. You are replacing an aristocracy with a bureaucracy, a world of oaths with a world of laws. It is a more stable world, but it is a less free one for the men who once held power. A decade passes. You are now Bishop of Chartres, one of the king's most trusted advisors. You stand beside his son, King Robert, a man who inherited a crown that is no longer a hollow symbol. The royal domain has doubled. The great lords still command vast territories, but they no longer ignore a royal summons. They come to Paris because they know that defiance will bring a royal army to their gates, an army that their own vassals might just join in hopes of gaining the king's favour. The ultimate test comes from Normandy. The Duke, a descendant of Vikings, rules his lands with an iron fist and considers himself the king's equal. He makes an alliance with the Count of Flanders and moves to challenge Robert's growing power. In our history, this would be a crisis that could shatter the kingdom, forcing the king to seek English or German aid. Here, King Robert does something unthinkable. He makes a pact with the Duke of Bavaria, one of the self-proclaimed German kings. For a hefty sum of silver, the Bavarian agrees to raid the lands of Flanders, forcing the Count to pull his armies back to defend his own home. Freed from a two-front war, Robert marches on Normandy. He does not win a decisive victory, but he fights the Duke to a standstill. The message is clear. The King of the Franks can play the same game of diplomacy and war as any of them, and the fractured German states are now little more than a mercenary pool for the great powers of the West. You see the future taking shape. With no rival to the east, the gilded lily of the Capetian dynasty is sinking deep roots. France is not destined to be one European power among many. It is becoming the power. Its gaze is turning outward, not with the fear of a threatened state, but with the ambition of a dominant one. The great struggles of this world will not be between France and Germany. They will be between a consolidated, absolutist French kingdom and the Norman adventurers, carving out a kingdom for themselves across the English Channel. And, eventually, between France and the mighty, alien Roman Empire that lies beyond the Alps. The heart of European power has shifted decisively from the Rhine to the Seine. The taste of your world is salt and sawdust. You are Marco, the son of a Genoese shipwright, and you have grown up in the cacophony of the harbour, a symphony of hammers on wood, creaking ropes, and the shouts of a dozen languages. It is the year 1050. Your father, his hands gnarled and permanently stained with pitch, remembers a different Genoa. He speaks of it in the evenings, his voice low over a cup of watered wine. He speaks of a city of wolves, a hungry republic that answered to no king, where a man with a fast ship and a sharp sword could carve a fortune from the sea. In his stories, the Mediterranean is a place of glorious, terrible freedom. Genoese galleys fought Pisan war fleets for control of Corsica. They dodged Saracen corsairs from Fraxinetum and the Balearics, sometimes trading with them, sometimes fighting them, depending on the season and the cargo. They made their own laws, their own wars, and their own fortunes. Their loyalty was to the Red Cross of St. George, the symbol of their city, and their god was the clink of gold florins. You listen to these stories, and they feel like fables from another age. They do not match the world you see from the docks every morning. The sea you know is not free. It is controlled. It began with your grandfather's generation, under the grandson of the great Berengar, an emperor named Leo III, who was more Roman than Lombard. He did not come to Genoa with fire and sword. He came with a treaty and a legion of imperial scribes. He did not demand fealty in the old feudal sense. He proposed a partnership. He offered a deal that was too good and too dangerous to refuse. The emperor's logic was brutally simple. He saw the sea not as a chaotic frontier, but as a system to be managed. The constant petty warfare between Genoa, Pisa, and Amalfi was a waste of resources. The Saracen pirates were a threat to stability. He declared the waters from the coast of Provence to the tip of Sicily to be the Mare Imperiale, the Imperial Sea, and within this sea there would be order. Today you see that order everywhere. At the mouth of the harbour stands a new lighthouse, taller and brighter than the old one, built by imperial engineers and funded by an imperial tax on every departing vessel. Patrolling the coast are the Liburnian galleys of the imperial fleet. Long, swift warships based in Naples and Ravenna. They are not Genoese ships. They are manned by professional sailors from across the peninsula, and they answer only to the imperial admiral. Their mandate is simple. Any ship not flying an approved flag, not carrying licensed cargo, is a pirate. And pirates are not ransomed. They are crucified on the docks. A grim lesson in the new rules of commerce. The wolves have been leashed. Genoa, Pisa, Venice, the great maritime republics, are no longer rivals. They are designated instruments of imperial policy. A complex charter, signed in Milan a generation ago, carved up the sea. Venice retains its dominance in the Adriatic, a gateway to the east. Pisa is granted the primary routes to Corsica and Sardinia. And your Genoa has been given the richest prize of all, the exclusive right to trade with the ports of the powerful, centralized French kingdom and the fractured Christian kingdoms of Iberia. You are building a new ship in your family's yard. It is a cocker, a rounder, deeper-hulled vessel designed for cargo, not for fighting. You no longer need to mount as many scorpions or carry as many marines. Your ship will sail in a convoy, escorted by imperial patrols to the mouth of the Rhone. The profits are smaller on each voyage, shaved by imperial tariffs, licensing fees, and the cost of the port prefect's signature on your manifest. But the profits are certain. In your father's day, 1 in 5 ships never returned. In your lifetime, your family has not lost a single vessel. This is the great, unspoken tension of your life. Your father sees a city of tamed dogs growing fat on the emperor's scraps. He curses the imperial bureaucrats with their endless paperwork and their disdain for the old merchant families. He sees the death of the Genoese spirit, the spirit of the risk-taker, the adventurer who answered to no man. You see progress. You see a world where you can secure a loan from the new imperial bank to build this bigger ship. You see your city growing richer than ever before, its harbours packed with vessels from across the known world. You are safe. You are prosperous. But you know, in a quiet part of your soul, that you are not free. The deal the emperor offered was the eternal trade-off: security for autonomy. Genoa has become a magnificent, wealthy, and utterly subordinate cog in a vast economic machine. The most unexpected consequence of this new order is where the empire's gaze is fixed. The old Genoese dream was of the east of the silks of Constantinople and the spices of the Levant. But the Italian emperors are obsessed with the south. To them, North Africa, the old Roman provinces of Africa, Numidia, and Mauritania, is not the heartland of a rival faith. It is a strategic necessity. It is the grain basket that once fed Rome, and it is the source of the pirates who once plagued the imperial sea. The emperor's policy is not a holy crusade. It is a cold, calculated campaign of economic and military dominance. Imperial fleets did not sail to liberate a holy sepulchre a world away. They sailed to secure the Sicilian Straits, to crush the Zirid emirs of Ifriqiya, and to establish fortified trading posts emporia in Tunis, Bone, and Tripoli. These are not colonies in a modern sense. They are fortified commercial enclaves, naval bases from which the empire projects its power, controls the coastal trade, and funnels the vast wealth of the African interior, the gold, salt, and slaves of the trans-Saharan routes northward into the imperial economy. You are loading your new cocker with Lombard steel and fine French wool. The destination is the Imperial Emporium at Tunis. There, you will trade your goods for sacks of hard durum wheat and barrels of olive oil, commodities whose prices are set not by the free market, but by the imperial prefect of provisions in Milan. Standing on the deck, you watch the imperial standard, the golden eagle on a field of purple being raised on the lighthouse. It is a symbol of the peace you enjoy, of the order that guarantees your livelihood. But it is not your flag. The Red Cross of Genoa still flies from your masthead, but it flies beneath the eagle, a permanent, visible reminder of your city's new place in the world. The Mediterranean is no longer a world of its own. It has been transformed back into what it once was, a Roman lake. Its currents are charted by imperial cartographers, its winds harnessed for imperial profit, its destiny shaped by a single will emanating from a palace in the Po Valley. This grand, unified Thalassocracy, this empire of the sea, is a foundation of power and wealth that the landlocked German emperors of another history could only have dreamed of. It is a power that will soon look beyond the Pillars of Hercules, not in search of glory or God, but of new markets to control and new systems to manage. You are a scribe, a weaver of words in the imperial scriptorium at Pavia. The year is 1140. The air here is heavy with the scent of parchment, lamp oil, and the perpetual hum of an imperial bureaucracy that has existed in various forms for over 2 centuries. You have been trained not in the dusty annals of Roman history, but in the practicalities of imperial decree, in the codification of law, and in the dissemination of the emperor's will. You serve Emperor Valerian II, a man whose ancestry traces directly back through an unbroken line of Italian rulers to the stubborn survival of Berengar of Friuli. The world outside your windows is one of order, but it is a brittle order, maintained by the constant application of imperial will. The Mediterranean, the Mar Imperiale, is a network of imperial naval patrols, fortified trading posts, and rigidly enforced trade agreements. The Saracen corsairs, once a menace, are now either subservient tributaries paying tribute, or are systematically hunted and eradicated by the imperial fleet. The call to arms comes not from Rome, but from Pavia. It is not a papal bull, but an imperial edict, read aloud in every major city and military garrison. The Emperor Valerian, a man of grave piety and unyielding pragmatism, has declared a new campaign, not to reclaim Jerusalem from the infidels, not to liberate a holy sepulchre that has been a distant, almost mythical goal in the fractured west of this timeline, but to secure the very foundations of imperial power. The target is the Emirate of Sicily and the North African coast, the last significant pockets of Muslim rule that lie astride the crucial sea lanes and grain routes of the Western Mediterranean. The emperor's proclamations speak not of divine mandate, but of economic necessity and the eradication of threats to imperial commerce. The papacy, entirely subservient to the emperor, dutifully issues its blessings, but the driving force is clearly temporal. This is not the Sermon on the Mount. It is the balance sheet of an empire. The papacy's role in this new reality is a consistent, almost tedious, theme. Pope Urban IV, a man whose election was, as always, confirmed by the emperor's representative, issues a decree that, in our history, would have been a call to arms to the faithful across Europe. Here, it is a carefully worded endorsement of the emperor's campaign, framing the conquest of Sicily as a righteous act to secure the Christian populations under Muslim rule and to remove a source of naval threat to the Mare Imperiale. The emperor needs no papal army, he has his own. You witness the mobilization from your vantage point. The imperial levies are called from across the peninsula, from the agricultural heartlands of Lombardy, the vineyards of Tuscany, the bustling ports of Genoa and Pisa. These are not enthusiastic knights riding for glory, but conscripted peasants and professional soldiers paid from the imperial treasury. Their loyalty is to the coin and the emperor's law, not to a distant, abstract concept of holy war. The fleet that sails from Ostia and Naples is immense. It is a testament to the economic might of the Italian Empire, a power that has focused its resources on naval supremacy rather than the distant, symbolic conflicts that drained the resources of other potential empires. The campaign against Sicily is swift and brutal. The island, divided and internally weakened by rivalries between Arab and Berber factions, falls with a speed that shocks the few observers in the fragmented lands to the north. The emperor's strategists are not seeking to convert the Muslim population. They are seeking to absorb their productive capacity. The mosques are not converted into churches. They are repurposed as granaries or administrative offices. Islamic scholars are tolerated, even encouraged to continue their work, provided they do not challenge imperial authority. The goal is not religious uniformity, but economic integration. The conquest of the African ports follows. This is a more challenging endeavor. The Berber tribes are fierce warriors, and the desert is a formidable ally. But the imperial navy, superior in technology and discipline, blockades the coast, cutting off supply lines. The fortified emporia established in the previous century become staging grounds for land campaigns. The war is long and costly, measured in years, not months. It is a war of attrition, of sieges, of poisoned wells and scorched earth. But the empire has the resources. The continuous flow of wealth from its Italian heartland and its established Mediterranean trade routes allows it to sustain a protracted conflict that would bankrupt any other power. The ethical tension here is stark and unavoidable. The emperor's actions are undeniably effective. He has brought order to a region long plagued by conflict. He has secured vital trade routes and eliminated the threat of piracy. He has integrated vast new territories into the imperial economic system, increasing the overall wealth and stability of his domain. But he has done so through brute force, through the systematic subjugation of entire populations. The religious and cultural freedoms of the conquered peoples are curtailed, not out of malice, but out of pragmatic indifference. Islam is not persecuted, but it is relegated to the status of a tolerated minority faith, its influence diminished, its political aspirations crushed. The emperor's justice is blind to faith, but it is also blind to cultural identity. It offers security and economic opportunity, but at the price of self-determination. The unexpected twist is the effect on the distant lands of Iberia. Without the constant threat of unified Muslim power on their southern flank, the Christian kingdoms of the North Castile, Aragon, and Leon find their own reconquista stalled. They are no longer driven by the existential urgency of a holy war against a unified caliphate. Instead, they engage in a series of smaller, more localized conflicts, often fighting amongst themselves for territory, rather than uniting against a common enemy. The emperor in Pavia does not care about the fate of Christendom in Iberia. He cares about controlling the trade routes. He allows Christian and Muslim merchants alike to trade in his ports, as long as they pay his tolls. The religious fervor that fuels the reconquista in our history is diluted by the emperor's pragmatism, replaced by a cold, calculated policy of economic exploitation. When the campaigns conclude, a new Mediterranean order is firmly established. The Emperor Valerian II, having secured the vital sea lanes and grain supplies, does not rest on his laurels. He turns his attention to the infrastructure that supports this new dominance. Vast sums are poured into building new harbours, dredging channels, and constructing a network of imperial roads that link the newly conquered African ports directly to the markets of Lombardy and Tuscany. The imperial fleet, no longer a defensive force, becomes a tool of projection, establishing naval supremacy not just in the Western Mediterranean, but beginning to probe the waters of the Atlantic. You, the scribe, are tasked with drafting new tariffs for the African trade, with detailing the regulations for the grain shipments that will feed the growing cities of the empire. You are part of the engine that drives this Roman resurgence, this calculated, pragmatic expansion of imperial power. There is no grand vision of spiritual conquest, no burning zeal for the cross. There is only the relentless pursuit of order, security, and profit. The age of glorious, chaotic freedom on the seas is over. It has been replaced by the age of the imperial Thalassocracy, a world where the emperor's law is as immutable as the tides. The light in Bologna is different. It is not the feverish, competitive glare of 100 rival towers scratching at the sky. It is not the shadowed, conspiratorial light of narrow medieval alleys. It is a cool, ordered, rational light, filtered through the high, arched windows of vast basilicas and reflected from the wide, paved expanse of the Forum Augustum. You are a student at the Imperial Archigymnasio, and you have come to Bologna to learn the machinery of the world. This is the year 1180, and the Italian Empire is at its zenith. It is a state built not on fealty, but on law, and this city, Bologna, is the forge where the instruments of that law are crafted. In another history, this would be a riotous place, a city where guilds of students from across Europe would band together to hire their own professors, demanding knowledge as a commodity. It would be a bottom-up explosion of intellectual curiosity. That is not your world. The Archigymnasio is not a guild. It is an imperial institution, funded directly from the treasury in Milan. Its curriculum mandated by the emperor's chancery. Its purpose is not to satisfy the curiosity of young men, but to produce the next generation of imperial prefects, jurists, architects, and administrators, who will manage the vast, complex apparatus of the state. Your father is a minor official in the grain administration in Ravenna. He sent you here not to become a great philosopher, but to become a useful man. And so, you study the law, not the tangled web of local customs and feudal obligations that passes for law north of the Alps. You study the Codex Justinianus, the great compilation of Roman jurisprudence, but you do not study it as a rediscovered relic from a lost golden age. You study it as a living document, the bedrock of an unbroken legal tradition. Your professors are not excitable humanists, marveling at the wisdom of the ancients. They are sober civil servants, annotating the text with the latest imperial edicts and precedents from the high courts in Pavia. This is the central, defining truth of your civilization. There was no Renaissance, because there was no true Dark Age. There was no dramatic, feverish rebirth, because the patient never died. The legacy of Rome was not lost and then found. It was carefully, methodically, and continuously administered. This is the Romanesque continuation. You see it in the very stones of the city. The great public works are magnificent. A new aqueduct, its arches striding across the landscape with the same arrogant perfection as those of antiquity, brings fresh mountain water to the city's fountains. The roads are paved, drained, and policed by imperial patrols. The public buildings are not the delicate, soaring Gothic creations of France. They are immense, solid structures of brick and stone, with rounded arches and thick walls. They are Romanesque, but on a scale and with an engineering prowess that speaks of immense resources and centralized planning. They are built to last for 1,000 years, to project the permanence and unshakable power of the empire. This is the architecture of the state, practical, powerful, and utterly devoid of whimsy. The art that fills these spaces serves the same purpose. You walk through the Basilica of St. Petronius, a project personally endowed by the emperor. There are no paintings filled with the raw human emotion of a Giotto, no sculptures capturing the divine in a human form like a Michelangelo. Instead, the walls glitter with vast, formal mosaics in the Byzantine style, a stern Christ Pantocrator, flanked by saints, and, in a place of honor, the Emperor Valerian and his Empress, their faces impassive, their halos a gift from a grateful church. The art does not seek to inspire personal piety or explore the human condition. It seeks to illustrate the divine and temporal hierarchy. It tells you your place in the universe, God above, the Emperor as his chosen vessel on earth, and you, the faithful and obedient subject, below. The unexpected twist of this unbroken continuity is its profound conservatism. Because you never lost the classical past, you are not inspired to radically reinvent it. Your culture is one of masterful imitation and gradual refinement, not of revolutionary creation. The great minds of your age are not poets wrestling with the vernacular or painters discovering the laws of perspective. They are engineers who can calculate the load-bearing capacity of an arch better than any Roman. They are jurists who have refined the laws of contract and property into a system of beautiful, inescapable logic. They have perfected the Roman machine. They have not invented a new one. The ethical tension simmers deep within you, in the quiet hours after your studies are done. The system works. It is a marvel of order and stability. The grain supply is secure. The law, while stern, is predictable. The currency is sound. You are a citizen of the most prosperous and well-administered state in the world. You are safe, and yet you feel a strange hunger. One evening, a fellow student, a restless soul from a Greek-speaking family in Sicily, shows you a book he has acquired at great cost from a Venetian trader. It is not on the approved curriculum. It is a copy of a play by a man named Sophocles, called Oedipus Rex. You read it together, huddled by candlelight, your voices hushed. The story shocks you. It is not about order or law or the glory of the state. It is about passion, fate, terrible mistakes, and the unbearable agony of a single, flawed human being. It is chaotic. It is terrifying. It is profoundly human. You look up from the forbidden scroll and see the perfectly ordered city outside your window, and you understand the price of your golden age. Your world has no room for an Oedipus. A man so consumed by his own tragic destiny would be a disruption to the system. He would be diagnosed by imperial physicians as suffering from an imbalance of the humours, counselled by a state-appointed priest, and, if he persisted in his disruptive passion, he would be quietly removed to a monastery or a provincial administrative post where he could do no harm. The empire has produced the greatest legal system since antiquity, but it has forgotten how to produce a tragedy. It celebrates the citizen, the soldier, the administrator. It has no vocabulary for the individual. The humanism that exploded across the city-states of our Renaissance, with its fierce belief in human dignity and potential, cannot take root in this soil. That ideology was born of political fragmentation, of competition, of wealthy patrons wanting to outdo each other with displays of unique genius. Here, there is only one patron that matters: the state. And the state desires competence, not genius, obedience, not innovation. You close the book and hand it back to your friend. You will go on to be a very successful man. You will become a judge, perhaps even a prefect, a master of the elegant, rational machine that governs your world. You will help build more aqueducts, enforce more laws, and maintain the glorious, unshakable peace of the Italian Empire. But you will never forget the story of the blind king, a story of a messy, passionate, human chaos that your perfect world has meticulously, and perhaps tragically, engineered out of existence. Your world is mud, steel, and a relentless, driving hunger. You are Raoul de Tancarville, the third son of a minor Norman baron, whose sliver of land near the Seine estuary can barely support your eldest brother, let alone you and the rest of the brood. You were born with a sword in your hand and a void in your belly where an inheritance should be. It is the year 1060. Your kind, the landless knights of Normandy, are a force of nature, a generation of wolves, lean, ambitious, and violent, looking for a flock to claim. For 2 generations, the stories told around the winter fires have been of the south. Tales of your kinsmen, the sons of Tancred de Hauteville, who went to Italy as mercenaries and became princes. They speak of Apulia, of Calabria, of a sun-drenched land of weak Lombard lords and squabbling Greeks, ripe for the taking. It is the Norman dream, to ride south with nothing but a good horse and a strong lance and carve out a kingdom under a warm sky. But the stories have changed. The merchants who sail up the coast to Rouen and the pilgrims returning from Rome speak of a different Italy now. Their tales are not of opportunity, but of order. They speak of the Imperium Italicum, a power as solid and unforgiving as the Alps. They tell of imperial legions garrisoning every major city south of Rome, of well-paid professionals who fight in disciplined formation. They describe the imperial fleet, the classis, whose galleys hunt down unauthorized ships with terrifying efficiency. A few years back, a band of Norman freelances, thinking the old stories still held true, tried to seize a town near Salerno. They were not captured and ransomed. They were surrounded by an imperial cohort, disarmed, and crucified along the Appian Way as a warning against banditry. The message was received all the way here in the drizzling rain of Normandy. The south is closed. The wolf's path is blocked by a wall of Roman steel. There will be no Norman kingdom of Sicily, no Robert Guiscard to humble popes and emperors. The Italian Empire has absorbed the chaos that was your inheritance. That great release valve for Norman ambition and violence has been sealed shut, and so the pressure builds. It builds here, in the damp, crowded halls of Normandy, where hundreds, thousands of men like you are staring at each other, their hands on their sword hilts, all fighting for the same few scraps. A great and terrible energy is being contained, and it must find another way out. That way is north, across the narrow strip of churning grey sea. Angleterre, Duke William, your formidable bastard-born lord, has a claim to the English throne. In another world, his invasion would be a risky venture, a dynastic gamble supported by his own ducal vassals and a few foreign adventurers. It would be one Norman enterprise among many, not in this world. Here, it is the only enterprise. It is the sole focus of the coiled serpent of Norman energy. When William puts out the call for warriors, it is not a trickle that responds, but a flood. From every corner of Normandy, Brittany, and Flanders, the third sons, the landless knights, the hungry wolves like you, flock to his banner. The promise of English land is no longer just a reward for loyal service to a duke. It is the only possible salvation for an entire generation. The invasion of England is not a dynastic war. It is a mass migration with swords. The fleet that gathers at the mouth of the Dives is impossibly large, far greater than the one that sailed in history. The army that lands at Pevensey in 1066 is a horde, desperate and single-minded. You stand in the shield wall at Hastings. The English housecarls are brave, magnificent warriors, their axes cleaving through shields and helmets. They hold their ridge for hours, a wall of Saxon flesh and courage. But for every Norman who falls, two more seem to take his place, their hunger for the fields behind the English lines giving them a demonic strength. The line does not break. It is eroded, overwhelmed, and finally submerged by a tide of sheer, desperate numbers. The victory is absolute. But what follows is not a mere change of kings. It is a cataclysm. In our history, the Norman conquest was a brutal affair, but one that ultimately led to a fusion, a blending of Norman and Saxon. Here, the conquest is too vast, too total. There are too many Normans to reward, too many hungry mouths to feed. William does not just replace the top tier of the Anglo-Saxon aristocracy, he eradicates it. The harrying of the North is not a punitive campaign. It is a systematic depopulation, a clearing of the land to make way for the new masters. You are granted a holding in Yorkshire, a collection of sullen villages and blackened fields. The former property of a thegn named Uhtred, whose head now adorns a spike on the walls of York. This is the unforeseen twist. You do not build a kingdom. You build an occupation. The sheer number of Norman settlers creates a society that has no need to integrate. You have your own French-speaking priests, your own French-speaking merchants, your own French-speaking bailiffs. You build your motte and bailey castle not to defend against foreign invaders, but to dominate the Saxon villagers who live in its shadow. You do not learn their guttural tongue. You force them to learn a few broken words of yours. The English language, that beautiful, chaotic hybrid of Old English and Norman French, is never born. There is only the elegant, aristocratic French of the conquerors and the crude, despised Saxon of the conquered. The ethical tension is the very air you breathe in your new stone keep. You have succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. You are a landed lord, a seigneur. You have brought order. You have ended the squabbling of the Saxon earls. You have built a state that is centralized, efficient, and powerful. But you are a stranger in your own lands. The faces that look up at you are filled with a silent, bottomless hatred. Your children will grow up speaking the language of Rouen and Paris, hearing the legends of Charlemagne and Roland, entirely alien to the soil beneath their feet. You have not won a kingdom, you have taken it prisoner. This stability, this order, is built upon the grave of a culture. You see the results in the Domesday Book, the great survey of the kingdom William commissions. It is a breathtaking document, a monument to administrative genius. But its language is Latin, and its purpose is to catalogue every ox, every peasant, every acre of land as a possession, an asset of the new Norman regime. It is not the book of a kingdom. It is the inventory of a conquered estate. This new Norman English state looks not inward, but back across the Channel. Its heart is not in London, but in Rouen. Its kings see themselves not as English rulers who happen to hold lands in France, but as French princes for whom England is a vast source of wealth and soldiers, a treasure chest, as one of your fellow barons calls it. The destiny of this island is not to be a unique, sea-girt nation. It is to be the powerhouse for Norman ambitions on the continent. The great struggle of the coming centuries will not be a dynastic squabble over Aquitaine. It will be a foundational war between two Frances: the ascendant, centralized kingdom of the Capetians in Paris, and the aggressive, cross-channel empire of the Norman kings, fueled by English silver and Saxon conscripts. The wolf, diverted from the warm south, has made its den in the cold north, and its hungry gaze is now fixed firmly on the gilded lily of France. You are a student of theology at the University of Wittenberg, and you believe you have finally found a man who speaks the truth. His name is Brother Matthias, an Augustinian monk, and his lectures are like a fire in the dead of winter. It is the year of our Lord, 1517. Your world, here in the heart of the Saxon lands, is a dreary provincial place. Your Duke, Frederick, is a decent man, but his is a small kingdom, one of a dozen squabbling German-speaking statelets, all living in the long shadow of the two great powers of Europe, the formidable Capetian kingdom of France to the west, and the colossal, ancient Italian empire to the south. The Church, you know, is a monolithic institution. Its head, the Pope in Rome, speaks with a voice that is amplified and enforced by the Emperor in Milan. It is a well-ordered church, its doctrines clear, its hierarchy absolute, its finances managed with the cold efficiency of an imperial bureau. It is powerful and it is pure, at least on the surface. But Brother Matthias has taught you to see the rot beneath the polished facade. The corruption is not one of debauchery, of grasping Borgia popes and their illegitimate children. That kind of chaos was purged centuries ago. The corruption is colder, more profound. It is the complete fusion of God and Caesar. You see it in the new indulgence being preached by a Dominican friar in the town square. In another world, this money would be destined for the glorious rebuilding of St. Peter's Basilica. Here, the parchments signed by the Pope promise a release from purgatory in exchange for a contribution to the Imperial Piety Fund, a fund designated for the construction of a new naval arsenal in Genoa to defend Christendom from the ever-present Ottoman threat. To Matthias, this is the ultimate blasphemy. It is not just the selling of salvation, it is the harnessing of God's grace to the engine of the state. It is making the emperor's will synonymous with the divine will. One damp autumn morning, the world cracks open. Brother Matthias, his face set like stone, nails a document to the door of the castle church. It is his disputation on the imperial sanction of grace. 95 theses, written in sharp, academic Latin. You and your fellow students rush to make copies, your hands shaking with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. The arguments are a thunderclap. Matthias questions the Pope's authority to remit punishments owed to God. He questions the very idea that the treasury of merit can be distributed for temporal gain. And, most dangerously of all, he implies that an emperor who uses the sacraments as a tool of state finance is not a protector of the faith, but its most insidious corrupter. For a few weeks it feels like the dawn of a new age. The theses, translated into the Saxon dialect, spread like wildfire through the town. Merchants, artisans, even some of the Duke's own men, read them and nod. Matthias is a hero. He has spoken a truth everyone felt in their bones, but dared not articulate. You watch Duke Frederick himself, a pious man known for his caution. He reads the document, his expression unreadable. He says nothing. He waits. In our history, this waiting, this political calculation by a powerful elector of a vast empire, gave the Reformation the space it needed to breathe and grow. But your Duke is not a powerful elector. He is the ruler of a minor state, on the periphery of a superpower. The response, when it comes, is not a theological debate. It is an administrative action. It arrives not from a distant, distracted emperor embroiled in a dozen different political crises, but from a unified, efficient imperial papal authority that has had centuries to perfect the art of crushing dissent. First, a papal bull arrives from Rome. It is concise and utterly uncompromising. Matthias is a heretic. His teachings are poison. He is to recant immediately or face excommunication. A week later, a second man arrives. He is not a cleric. He is an imperial legate, a man named Octavianus. His northern Italian dialect, crisp and cold in the damp Saxon air. He does not request an audience with the Duke. He is granted one immediately. You are a junior clerk in the ducal court, and you watch the meeting from the shadows of the hall. The legate does not threaten or bluster. He is the personification of polite, bureaucratic menace. He presents the Duke with an imperial edict from Milan. It declares Matthias of Wittenberg guilty of sedition against the divinely ordained order of the empire. The Duke is requested to arrest the monk and surrender him to imperial justice. Duke Frederick hesitates. He speaks of German customs, of the right of his subject to a fair hearing. He is a man of God, the Duke protests weakly. His dispute is with Rome. Octavianus allows a thin, cold smile. Your Grace, he says, his voice soft. His dispute is with the mechanism that funds the fleet that keeps the Turk from sailing up the Adriatic. His heresy undermines the security of the entire Christian world, your own small kingdom included. The emperor is most concerned that Saxon trade should continue to flow smoothly over the Alpine passes. It would be a tragedy if complications were to arise. The threat is unspoken, but it fills the room like a choking gas. There is no talk of armies. The empire does not need to invade. It can simply close the arteries of commerce. It can isolate Saxony, bankrupt its merchants, and leave it to starve, a pariah state in the heart of Europe. The ethical dilemma is laid bare at the Duke's feet. Protect this one man, this speaker of truth, and condemn your entire people to poverty and isolation, or sacrifice the man to preserve the peace and prosperity of your realm? In our history, Frederick the Wise had other powerful princes to stand with him, a network of countervailing power that could challenge the emperor. Your Duke Frederick stands utterly alone. The other German kings, the Bavarian, the Franconian, are his rivals. They would celebrate his downfall. The choice is no choice at all. That evening, you go to the Augustinian monastery to warn Brother Matthias. You find him in the chapel praying. He is not afraid. There is a profound, tragic calm about him. He knows his fate. God's will is not always done in the light, he tells you. Perhaps the seed must fall on stony ground for a time. The Duke's soldiers come at dawn. They are apologetic. They treat him gently. There is no crowd, no protest. The people who praised his name a week ago now shutter their windows, their fear overwhelming their conviction. Matthias is taken in a closed carriage, heading south. He will not go to a great diet at Worms to make a stand before the powers of the world. He will go to Bologna, to be questioned in a quiet, windowless room by the masters of the Imperial Inquisition, men who are experts in the theology of recantation and the mechanics of pain. His name will be recorded in the archives as a minor heretic, efficiently managed. The silence that descends on Wittenberg is absolute. The sale of indulgences resumes, more briskly than ever, as people rush to prove their loyalty. The 95 Theses become a forbidden text, whispered about but never seen. You burn your own copy, the ashes stinging your eyes. The spark has been extinguished. A century of religious warfare has been averted. Europe will not be torn asunder by the wars of Reformation and Counter-Reformation, but it is the peace of a graveyard. The great intellectual blossoming of the North, the questioning of authority, the rise of the individual conscience, the translation of the Bible into the vernacular is stillborn. The mind of Northern Europe remains shackled to a single, monolithic authority, an authority directed from a sun-drenched peninsula across the mountains. The heresy is not just defeated, it is silenced so completely that future generations will barely know it ever existed. Your hands are calloused, and your mind is a landscape of angles, stresses, and the precise curvature of cut stone. You are Giovanni, a master builder in the Imperial Guild of Engineers, and you are standing on a wooden scaffold high above the Venetian lagoon. The year is 1620. Below you, the murky water churns with the activity of 1,000 workers. You are not building a new palace for a doge or a cathedral to the glory of God. You are overseeing the final stages of the Aqua Augusta Literalis, the great coastal aqueduct, a project that has consumed the lives of 2 generations of men like you. It is a monument to a way of thinking. The aqueduct will carry fresh water from the foothills of the Alps, not just to Venice, but to a series of new, planned settlements along the coast, creating a vast, integrated zone of agriculture and commerce. It is a work of breathtaking ambition, a testament to the power of a state that values order, utility, and control above all else. This is the science of the Italian Empire. It is the science of the practical. From your perch, you can see the ships of the Imperial fleet in the arsenal, a sight that in another world would be a symbol of Venetian independence. Here, it is the northern headquarters of the Imperial Navy, its construction and finances managed directly from Milan. The knowledge that designed those ships, the precise calculations of hull displacement, the optimal angle of the lateen sail, the chemistry of better quality pitch, is the same kind of knowledge that built this aqueduct. It is a science of results. You remember your training at the Archiginnasio in Bologna. Your masters were not astronomers or philosophers. They were men like Vitruvius and Frontinus, the great Roman engineers, reborn in your age. You did not study the abstract mathematics of the cosmos. You studied hydraulics, soil mechanics, and the tensile strength of Lombard iron. Your final examination was not a theological disputation, but the design of a new type of canal lock capable of lifting heavier barges. This is the world the Romanesque continuation has built. A world where the greatest minds are not drawn to the heavens, but to the earth. The empire rewards what is useful. An engineer who can reclaim swampland in the Po Delta and turn it into productive farmland will be granted a title and a pension. A jurist who can streamline the tax code will see his family elevated for generations. An alchemist who develops a stronger form of concrete will have his name inscribed on the imperial works he helps to build. But the astronomer who claims the Earth revolves around the Sun. In this world, Galileo Galilei is not a celebrated rebel, a martyr for empirical truth. He is a footnote in the archives of the University of Padua, a brilliant but eccentric mathematician whose cosmological theories were deemed destabilizing to the established order and of no practical utility to the state. He was not imprisoned. That would be too theatrical. His funding was cut. His professorship was terminated, and he was offered a generous sinecure tutoring the children of a minor official in Sicily. A gentle but firm message that his brand of inquiry was not welcome. The intellectual energy of the empire is directed inward and downward to the mastery of the terrestrial world, not outward to the questioning of the celestial. The unexpected twist is not a lack of progress, but a different kind of progress. Without the disruptive spark of the scientific revolution, the great leap into theoretical physics and abstract cosmology never happens. There is no Newton, no Leibniz, no Einstein in this world's future. But in your present, the material world is in some ways more advanced than the Europe of our 17th century. Your guild has developed a primitive form of the steam engine, not from an understanding of thermodynamics, but through centuries of patient, practical experimentation, with pumps used to drain mines in the Apennines. It is a clumsy, monstrously inefficient machine of brass and iron, but it works. It is used not to power factories, but to operate massive cranes in the Imperial quarries, and to pump water to the highest levels of the aqueduct. It is a tool of the state, for the projects of the state. Similarly, the Imperial Opticians Guild in Florence has perfected the art of grinding lenses, but their finest telescopes are not pointed at the moons of Jupiter. They are mounted in watchtowers along the coast, used to spot the sails of Turkish corsairs or smugglers from the French kingdom. Their most powerful microscopes are not used to discover blood cells, but to inspect the quality of silk threads in the imperial textile manufactories, ensuring no merchant is cheating the state on quality. Knowledge is not pursued for its own sake, it is pursued for its application. The ethical tension is one that you, a man of practical genius, feel keenly. You are a builder. You bring clean water to thousands. You help raise structures of astonishing beauty and utility. You are improving the lives of millions of imperial citizens. Is this not the highest calling of a learned man? And yet, you have heard whispers, rumours carried by French traders, of the strange new philosophies flourishing in the fragmented, chaotic lands to the north. They speak of men who use mathematics to describe the fall of an apple and the orbit of the moon with the same equation. They talk of a clockwork universe, not as a metaphor for divine order, but as a system to be understood and perhaps even mastered on its own terms. These ideas are thrilling, but they are also terrifying. They feel like a form of madness. To what end does one chart the stars? What profit is there in knowing the speed of light? It is knowledge untethered from purpose, from order, from the needs of society. It is the kind of intellectual chaos that the empire has so carefully and so successfully suppressed for 700 years. One evening, a young apprentice, a boy with a restless mind, asks you a question that cuts to the heart of this tension. "Master Giovanni," he says, pointing to the star-strewn sky above the lagoon, "do you not wonder what those lights are? Why they move as they do?" You look at the boy, and then you look at the aqueduct, its perfect, serene arches marching into the twilight. "I wonder," you reply, your voice heavier than you expect. "How many families will drink clean water tomorrow because we calculated the stresses on this pier correctly? That is the science that matters, my boy. That is the science of Rome." You turn your back on the stars and focus on the solid, predictable world of stone and water you have helped to build. It is a magnificent world, a triumph of pragmatic reason, but it is a world with a low sky. The human mind, which in another timeline was about to launch itself on a journey to the farthest reaches of the cosmos, is here kept firmly, safely, and productively grounded. The secrets of the universe will remain secrets, not because of religious dogma, but because no one with the power to fund the research can be convinced that they are worth the price of asking. The light on the Tagus estuary is silver, and it lies on the water like a freshly minted coin. You are Duarte Pacheco, a cartographer and navigator in the service of King John II of Portugal. Your workshop, in the shadow of the Belém Tower, smells of salt, ink, and ambition. For decades, men like you have been the masters of the Atlantic. You have charted the wind gyres, perfected the caravel, and crept, league by agonizing league. Down the coast of Africa, chasing the dream of a sea route to the Indies. You are a pioneer on the edge of the world. But the world has a center, and it is not Lisbon. It is Milan. Every dispatch, every merchant's letter, every diplomatic pouch that arrives from the south speaks of the overwhelming power of the Italian Empire. It is an ancient, wealthy, and deeply conservative state. For centuries, it was content to manage its Roman lake, the Mediterranean. But the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks 40 years ago, a catastrophic event that sent shockwaves through Christendom, has changed the imperial calculus. The traditional trade routes to the east are now choked, controlled by a hostile power. The price of pepper and silk in the markets of Milan has quadrupled, and the empire, which solves all problems with the methodical application of overwhelming force and resources, has decided that a new route must be found. The project is not a secret. It is a matter of imperial pride, announced by edict and funded by a special levy. You have seen the reports from your spies in Genoa. The imperial arsenal is not sponsoring a few brave adventurers. It is constructing a fleet, a dozen ships, larger and more robust than any caravel in your king's modest navy, equipped with the best navigational tools the imperial guilds can produce. They are to be commanded by a Genoese captain, a man of soaring ambition and dubious calculations named Cristoforo Colombo. In your king's court, the mood is one of impotent fury. You, the Portuguese, are the ones who have done the hard work. You have mastered the open ocean while the Italians were still hugging the Mediterranean coast. King John listened to this same Genoese captain years ago, and his own expert cosmographers dismissed Colombo's figures as wild fantasy. They were right, but you are beginning to understand a terrible truth. Being right does not matter when you are competing against a power that can afford to be wrong. The Italian fleet is so large, so well supplied, it can blunder its way to a discovery that your careful, precise, and underfunded efforts can only dream of. The ethical tension gnaws at you. Your king is a Renaissance prince, a believer in the power of the individual genius, the bold navigator, the clever inventor. He rewards merit. The empire is a bureaucracy. It does not believe in genius, it believes in systems. Colombo is not a hero to them. He is a project manager, a state employee entrusted with a state asset. Is it better for the world to be opened up by the daring of free men, or by the cold, inexorable logic of a state machine? You champion the former, but you fear the latter is unbeatable. In the autumn of 1493, the news arrives, and it shatters your world. It does not come as a rumour, but as a formal proclamation, delivered to your king by an imperial ambassador. The Golden Fleet, as the Italians call it, has returned. It did not find the Indies, it found something else. Something vast, uncharted, and, according to the proclamation, now under the eternal sovereignty of the Emperor in Milan. They have named it Terra Augusta, the Augustan land. There is no scramble for advantage, no frantic diplomacy. The day after the announcement, Pope Alexander VI, a Valencian by birth, but a man who knows his position is owed to imperial assent, issues a bull, Inter Caetera Aeterna. It is not a negotiation. It does not draw a line on a map dividing the new world between rival powers, as the Tordesillas Treaty would in another timeline. It is a simple, brutal statement. As the Emperor is the sworn protector of the Holy See and all of Christendom, it is the sacred duty and right of the Empire to bring these new lands and their peoples into the fold of civilized Christian order. The entire new world is granted, in perpetuity, to the Italian crown. There is no one to protest. The fractured German kingdoms have no blue water navies. The powerful French kingdom is a continental power, its ambitions fixed on the Rhine, not the Atlantic. And your Portugal and your neighbours in Castile and Aragon are simply too small to challenge the imperial behemoth. The unexpected twist is in the nature of the enterprise that follows. The reports you begin to receive are not of swashbuckling conquistadors seeking cities of gold. The empire is already drowning in wealth. It has no need for a frantic, destructive treasure hunt. This is not a conquest, it is an assessment. The first ships to follow Colombo's fleet are not filled with soldiers, but with agrimensores, land surveyors, jurists, and prefects from the imperial bureaucracy. Their mission is not to plunder, but to catalogue. They are to map the coastlines, assess the quality of the soil, identify natural resources, timber, stone, potential farmland, and establish a series of fortified administrative centres. The native peoples they encounter are not viewed as souls to be converted in a wave of religious fervour, nor as slaves to be worked to death in mines. They are viewed as potential imperial subjects, a resource to be managed, taxed, and over time, assimilated. The first imperial edict concerning Terra Augusta is not about the division of spoils, but about the standardization of weights and measures to be used in the new territories. You watch from Lisbon as the imperial machine moves with a speed and efficiency that is both terrifying and admirable. Within a decade, they establish a permanent capital, Augusta Nova, on a large defensible harbour. They do not build a ramshackle gold rush town. They lay out a proper Roman city, with a grid plan, a forum, an aqueduct, and a governor's palace, its foundations built by imperial engineers. There is violence, of course. Rebellious tribes are crushed with ruthless military professionalism. But it is the violence of the state, organized and purposeful, not the chaotic, freelance brutality of the Spanish conquest of our world. The goal is always the same: the establishment of order and the efficient extraction of resources for the benefit of the metropole. You spend the rest of your life drawing maps of a world that belongs to someone else. You chart the coasts of Terra Augusta based on the meticulous, sterile reports forwarded as a professional courtesy from the Imperial Cartographic Office in Bologna. The names on your maps are not Portuguese or Spanish, but Latin: Promontorium, Valerium, Flumen Leo, Portus Augustus. The Atlantic, which was to be your nation's destiny, has become another imperial lake. The great historical accident of a Genoese navigator in the service of Spain has been replaced by the historical inevitability of an imperial subject reporting to his emperor. The age of discovery has not been an explosion of competing European energies, but a systematic, state-directed expansion of a single, dominant power. The New World will not be a mosaic of different cultures, languages, and colonial systems. It will be a vast, monolithic extension of the old one, a new Roman province waiting to be built. You stand on the Radchany Hill, looking down at the city of Prague, and the cold autumn wind feels like the breath of history itself. You are Jan of Tarnow, a knight in the service of King Władysław IV of the Krakowian Union, and this city, with its sea of red-tiled roofs and the Vltava River gleaming like a silver serpent below, is the westernmost jewel in your sovereign's vast crown. It is the year 1350. You have spent your life on the march, your armour a second skin. You have fought the Tatar horsemen on the endless plains of the east and the scheming boyars of the Rus's principalities in the northern forests. But this frontier, the western one, is different. It is quiet. It is a frontier of decay. Your grandfather, who served the great King Boswar, used to tell you stories of the old fears, stories of the German dukes, the Niemcy, who were once a looming threat. The Margraves of Brandenburg, the Dukes of Saxony. Their names were once spoken with a mix of hatred and respect. They were the great rivals for control of the Pomeranian coast, for the fertile lands of Silesia, for the silver mines of Bohemia. Those stories now sound like tales of mythical beasts. You look west from this castle, and you do not see an empire. You see a patchwork quilt of pathetic, warring statelets. The so-called King of Saxony is a glorified robber baron who cannot even keep the peace on his own roads. The Franconians hire themselves out as mercenaries to the highest bidder. The Germanies are not a wall. They are a swamp, a political morass that has been steadily receding for 2 centuries. Its lands slowly and inexorably swallowed by the rising powers to its east. There was no Drang nach Osten, no German drive to the east. There was no great crusade of Teutonic knights to conquer and convert the Baltic peoples. Without the backing of a unified empire, they were little more than a minor monastic order, easily crushed by your ancestors. Instead, history flowed the other way. There was a pchniency na zachod, a Polish push to the west. This city is the proof. Prague was once the proud capital of an independent Bohemian kingdom, a kingdom that tried to play the Germans off against the Poles against the Hungarians. A century ago, the last Premyslid king died without an heir, and the kingdom fell into chaos. The Saxon duke tried to intervene. The Bavarian made a claim, but they were too weak, too divided. It was your king who marched in with a real army, an army of disciplined Polish knights and hardy Lithuanian light cavalry from the eastern domains of the Union. He did not come to mediate, he came to claim. The Bohemian crown now rests in the Wawel Cathedral in Krakow, and Prague is governed by a Polish voivode. This is the great, unforeseen consequence of a power vacuum. Nature abhors it, and so does geopolitics. The space that should have been occupied by a Holy Roman Empire was instead filled by the 2 powers that had the unity and the will to expand. Your Kingdom of Poland and the equally formidable Apostolic Kingdom of Hungary to the south. And here lies the twist of your world. Your true rival, the power you measure your strength against, is not the German. It is the Magyar. For 200 years, the history of this land has been the story of a great game played between Krakow and Buda. A deadly dance of war, diplomacy, and royal marriages. You absorbed Silesia. They took Austria. You claimed Bohemia. They consolidated their hold on Croatia, looking toward the Adriatic. Together, you form the eastern rampart of Latin Christendom, a colossal block of territory stretching from the Baltic to the Danube. You are the shield that broke the Mongol hordes at Legnica and Mohi, victories that were not German but Slavic and Magyar. But you are also rivals, 2 wolves that have grown large by devouring the same flock, and now eye each other over the last kill. The ethical tension of this reality is the very stone beneath your feet. You are proud. You walk through this magnificent city as a master. Your language, Polish, is the language of the court and the army. You have brought the king's peace to lands that were torn by the petty wars of German princelings and Bohemian nobles. Your union is a great power, a bastion of stability. But you are not a liberator. You see the sullen glances of the Czech merchants in the old town square. You hear the German-speaking burghers of the lesser town whisper behind their hands. You have brought order, but it is an order imposed by the sword. The great university, the Charles University of another world, was founded here not by a Bohemian king, but by your king, and its primary language of instruction is Polish. It exists to train administrators for a Slavic empire, not to nurture a Czech identity. Is the Wawel crown any less heavy, any less imperial, than the one that might have been worn in Aachen. You have replaced one potential master with another. This Slavic Magyar Imperium has utterly reshaped the map of Europe. There are three great Latin powers. The Italian Empire, ancient, rich, and bureaucratic, dominates the south and the seas. The Kingdom of France, centralized and arrogant, is master of the west. And there is your union, the vast, agrarian, and militaristic powerhouse of the east. These are the pillars of the world. Your relationship with the other powers is one of distant, mutual respect. Italian merchants are welcome in your cities. Their florins are vital lubricant for your economy. But the emperor's concerns are not your concerns. His endless naval struggle against the Turks feels as remote to you as your own border wars against the Tatars must feel to him. You are two separate worlds, two different kinds of Christendom. His is a world of cities, trade, and Roman law. Yours is a world of vast plains, feudal levies, and a proud, unbending warrior aristocracy, the Slakta. Standing here, on the edge of the Slavic world, you feel the sheer inertia of this new reality. You are no longer on the periphery of Europe. You are the heart of a new Europe, an eastern-facing one. The great questions of the next century will not be decided on the Rhine. They will be decided on the Dnieper, as your union pushes further into the lands of the Rus, and in the valleys of the Carpathians, where Polish and Hungarian interests will inevitably collide. The Germanies, the land that should have been an empire, are now just a buffer, a collection of client states and contested territories. Their destiny is to be a permanent shatterbelt between the great powers of the West and the East. They will not produce a Luther, a Bach, a Kant. They are a backwater, a land of missed opportunities and forgotten kings. Their history a footnote in the grand narrative of the giants who grew strong in the space they left behind. You are an apprentice printer in the workshop of Aldus Manutius the Younger, and Venice is the throat of the world. It is the year 1550. Through this city flows the commerce of empires. Silks from the Ottoman East, wool from the French kingdom, silver from the imperial colonies in Terra Augusta, and amber from the vast Slavic Union of the north. But more precious than any of these is the commodity your master trades in: words. Your workshop is a clattering, greasy, alchemical place. The rhythmic thump of the great wooden screw press is the heartbeat of your world. The air is thick with the metallic tang of lead type and the sharp scent of linseed oil ink. You are at the very center of a revolution, but it is a revolution of a different character than the one that unfolded in another timeline. In our history, the printing press was an agent of fragmentation. It gave voice to the vernaculars German, English, French, and shattered the universal authority of Latin. It fueled the Reformation, spreading dissent with a speed that the old authorities could not control. Here, the press is an agent of unification. Its primary function is to serve the needs of the one entity with the resources and the reach to use it on a continental scale: the Italian Empire. The language you are setting in your composing stick is not the scholarly Latin of the old church, nor the lyrical Venetian dialect you speak with your friends in the wine shops. It is the lingua Augustia, the Augustan tongue. It began its life 5 centuries ago as a blend of the Lombard and Tuscan dialects spoken in the imperial court at Pavia and Milan. Over the generations, it was refined, standardized, and codified by the imperial chancery. It was the language of law, of administration, of the army, and with the invention of printing, it has become the language of everything else. You are setting the type for a new edition of Virgil's Aeneid. But it is not a dusty, scholarly text. It is a mass-market paperback, small enough to fit in a saddlebag, its text flanked by a parallel translation in the lingua Augustia. The project is subsidized by the Imperial Ministry of Culture. The goal is explicit: to ensure that every educated subject of the empire, from the vineyards of Sicily to the foothills of the Alps, is not just bilingual, but bicultural, a fluent inheritor of both the new imperial language and its classical Roman roots. This is the central pillar of imperial cultural policy: assimilation through language. Local dialects are not forbidden, but they are marginalized. To get a government post, to enter a university, to sign a major commercial contract, you must be fluent in the lingua Augustia. It is the language of power, of ambition, of modernity. It has become the new, living lingua franca of the Western world. You see the evidence in the orders that come into your workshop. You print trade manuals in the Augustan tongue for merchants in Barcelona. You print artillery treatises for the King of France's army, because the best military engineers are imperial, and they write in their own language. You print philosophy texts for students in Krakow, who must learn the tongue if they wish to read the latest commentaries on Plato, which are all being written and published out of Bologna and Padua. The language of Milan has become to your world what English is to ours, the indispensable medium of international discourse. The unexpected twist is the subtle death of other literatures before they can truly be born. Across the Alps, the world of letters is anemic. In the fractured German kingdoms, there is no Luther to forge a unified German language from a translation of the Bible. Authors write in their local Saxon or Bavarian dialects for a tiny audience, or they write in clumsy, academic Latin. Their literature is provincial, starved of the oxygen of a large reading public. In France, the royal court promotes its own tongue, but it is fighting a constant battle against the overwhelming cultural gravity of the empire. The most fashionable French authors pepper their prose with Augustan words and phrases, and the highest ambition for a Parisian playwright is to have his work translated and performed on the stage in Milan. The ethical tension lies in the very beauty and efficiency of what you are creating. You are part of a grand civilizing project. The lingua Augustia is a magnificent instrument, elegant, precise, and capable of expressing the most complex ideas in law, science, and art. The standardization of language has made commerce more efficient, governance more just, and knowledge more accessible than ever before. But this unity is a steamroller. You pick up a stray page from a small, privately commissioned book of poetry your master printed as a favor. It is in the Sicilian dialect, a tongue rich with the echoes of Greek, Arabic, and Norman French. The words are beautiful, passionate, and almost incomprehensible to you. It feels like an artifact from a dying world. The project of creating a universal language is also a project of erasing 1,000 smaller, unique ways of seeing and speaking. You are building a vast, well-lit library, but you are doing it by clearing a forest, and you cannot help but wonder about the strange and beautiful creatures that lived there. Your mastery of the new language has given you a future. You are not destined to be a simple typesetter. Your fluency in the lingua Augustia and your skill in the printer's craft have brought you to the attention of an imperial functionary. He has offered you a position in the newly established Imperial Printing Office in Augusta Nova, the capital of the New World colony of Terra Augusta. Your job will be to oversee the production of catechisms, legal codes, and agricultural manuals in the lingua Augustia for the administration of the new province. You will be an agent of this linguistic empire, helping to transmit its culture across an ocean, ensuring that the children of the native peoples and the imperial colonists will all speak the same tongue, read the same books, and dream the same imperial dreams. You accept without hesitation. It is the opportunity of a lifetime. As you pack your belongings, you slip the page of Sicilian poetry into your bag. It is a relic, a keepsake, from a world of beautiful, inefficient diversity a world your life's work will now be dedicated to making obsolete. The primacy of the lingua franca is the triumph of order over chaos, of the universal over the particular. And like all great triumphs, it is also a quiet, profound tragedy. The sun on the Ionian Sea is a hammer of white gold, and you have learned to read its glare on the water like a language. You are Demetrios Phocas, triarch of the Imperial galley Aquila, and you are a Roman. This is a truth as solid as the limestone cliffs of your native Kerkyra. Your grandfather, a subject of the dying Palaeologoi emperors in Constantinople, would have scoffed at the idea. To him, the Romans were the Greeks, the inheritors of the true imperial city. The men from across the Adriatic were Latins, Italians, a different species. Your father saw it differently. He saw the Venetians, those merchants of chaos, bleed your island dry, and then he saw the arrival of the imperial legions from Milan. They did not come as conquerors in the Venetian style, seeking a private fortune. They came with engineers, jurists, and tax assessors. They built a new harbour, a new aqueduct, and they established the Classis Orientalis, the Eastern Fleet, with your island as its iron heart. They brought order. Your father, a pragmatic man, swore an oath of service. You were born into that oath. You were educated at the Imperial Naval Academy in Ravenna, and you speak the lingua Augustea as fluently as your native Greek. You serve the Emperor in Milan, and you are a Roman. It is the summer of 1571. The world holds its breath. From the east comes news that strikes fear into the hearts of every Christian. From the wine-dark seas of the Aegean to the foggy shores of the Norman-English Channel, the Ottoman Sultan Selim II has unleashed the greatest fleet ever to sail from the Golden Horn. His target is Cyprus, the last great Christian island in the eastern Mediterranean, a vital imperial protectorate. In another history, this would be a moment of panic, of desperate diplomacy, of the Pope trying to stitch together a fragile Holy League from the squabbling, rivalrous states of Spain, Venice, and the Papal States, each with its own agenda. Here, there is no league. There is only the Empire. The response is not a crusade. It is a mobilization. A coded message arrives from the Admiralty in Milan. There is no debate, no negotiation. The order is simple. The Eastern Fleet will rendezvous with the Central Mediterranean Fleet off the coast of Calabria and engage the enemy. The war has been planned for decades. The ships have been built, the crews trained, the logistics calculated. The Imperial Piety Fund, financed by the very indulgences that a German monk once protested, pays for the extra rations and the tons of gunpowder now being loaded onto your ship. You watch as the fleet gathers in the Straits of Otranto. It is a sight that stills the soul. 200 galleys, their oars moving with the metronomic precision of a single organism. But they are not the heart of the fleet. That honour belongs to the 6 Galleazza Imperiale, the imperial galleasses. They are your world's super weapons, products of the state-sponsored engineering guilds. They are floating fortresses, their high castles bristling with bronze cannons cast in the imperial foundries of Brescia. They are slow, clumsy, but they carry more firepower than a dozen galleys. They are the ultimate expression of the Empire's philosophy, the application of overwhelming, systematized force. The Ottoman fleet you meet off Cape Matapan is magnificent and terrifying, a crescent of colour, noise and aggression, their banners snapping in the wind, the sound of drums and horns rolling across the water. They are brave, seasoned warriors, the undisputed masters of this sea for a century. But they are expecting a battle of wolves, a chaotic melee of boarding actions and individual ship-to-ship duels. You give them a machine. The Imperial Admiral, a cold, methodical man from a noble Genoese family, does not charge. He forms his fleet into a rigid three-line formation, with the galleasses anchored in front like iron islands. The Ottoman commander, Ali Pasha, seeing this strange static formation, takes the bait. He orders a full frontal assault. From the deck of the Aquila, you witness a slaughter. The galleasses open fire. Their broadsides are not the scattered shots of individual cannons, but coordinated volleys, a storm of iron that smashes into the tightly packed Ottoman formation. Oars are shattered, hulls are splintered. Men are torn to pieces before they can even draw their scimitars. The sea is churned red. The battle is over before it truly begins. The superior discipline, superior firepower, and unified command of the Imperial fleet annihilate the Ottoman armada. It is not a heroic victory in the old sense. It is the victory of a system over an army of heroes. It is a massacre. This is the turning point. The tide of history, which in another world was turned back at Lepanto by a fractious coalition, is here broken against a single, solid wall of Roman steel. The Ottoman naval threat in the Mediterranean is not just checked. It is shattered for a generation. And here is the unexpected, brutal twist. As the cheers echo across the water, you feel a surge of pride. Your home is safe. The sea is Roman again. But the victory is too complete. The empire is a thalassocracy, a sea power. Its strategic interests end at the coastline. It has no desire for a long, bloody, and unprofitable land war in the rugged mountains of the Balkans. The Sultan, his naval ambitions crushed, turns his gaze inward and northward. Unable to expand across the sea, he consolidates and intensifies his grip on the lands he already holds. The reports you receive from your relatives on the Greek mainland, in Serbia, in Bulgaria, become darker. With the sea route to Egypt secure, and no need to fund another massive fleet, the Sultan's armies march north up the Danube. The kingdoms of Poland and Hungary, the great land powers of the East, now face the full, undivided attention of the Ottoman war machine on their own borders. And for the Christian peoples of the Balkans, the imperial victory at sea is a catastrophe. Their Ottoman masters, with no external naval threat to distract them, entrench their rule. The Devshirme, the levy of boys for the Janissary Corps, becomes more frequent, more brutal. The taxes become heavier. The hope of a liberation from the sea, a hope they had nurtured for a century, is extinguished. This is the ethical tension of your victory, a tension that settles in your heart like a lead weight. You are a Greek, and you have helped secure the freedom and prosperity of the Greek islands. But in doing so, you have helped condemn the Greeks of the mainland to another 2 centuries of servitude. The empire is the bulwark of Christendom, but it is a bulwark with ramparts that only face the sea. It protects its own commercial and strategic interests with ruthless efficiency. It does not protect Christianity. It protects itself. You return to your base in Kerkyra, a hero. You are decorated by the admiral. Your name read out in the dispatches sent to Milan. You have helped secure the Mar Imperiale for another generation. But when you stand on the high citadel of your island and look east, towards the dark, brooding mountains of Epirus, where your cousins live under the shadow of the crescent moon, you do not feel like a savior. You feel like a gatekeeper, one who has locked the door from the outside, leaving his own people trapped in the dark. You are a silk merchant from Lyon, and you are trapped between 2 worlds. It is the year 1680, and you have just spent 3 months in the Italian Empire on a purchasing trip. Now, returning to your native France, You feel as though you have travelled not just across a mountain range, but across centuries. The empire you just left is a place of ceaseless, humming activity. The cities Milan, Bologna, Florence are vast, orderly metropolises, their streets paved and lit by oil lamps at night, a recent innovation of the Imperial Guild of Engineers. You travelled on the Via Augusta, a great paved road that runs the length of the peninsula, your carriage paying a toll at Imperial stations, your safety guaranteed by the frequent patrols of the Gendarmeria Imperiale. You conducted your business in the Lingua Augustea, using bills of exchange drawn on the Bank of Milan, a quasi-governmental institution whose credit is as solid as the Alps. The men you dealt with were not flamboyant aristocrats, but sober, black-robed functionaries, members of the great merchant guilds that are an extension of the state. Their status was determined not by their bloodline, but by their rank in the guild hierarchy, by the amount of tax they paid, by the size of their contributions to the imperial navy. You saw a society that had moved beyond the old feudal order. It is a centralized, bureaucratic, urbanized world of commerce and law. It is, in its own way, profoundly modern. Now you are in France, and the air itself feels different. It is the world of the Sun King, Louis XIV, a monarch of dazzling absolute power. But the sinews of that power are ancient and brittle. As your carriage bumps and lurches along a rutted dirt road, you pass a peasant chained to a post, his face bloody. His crime, your driver tells you, was poaching a deer in the local count's forest. This is the first, jarring contrast. In the empire, the law is the emperor's, uniform and impersonal. Here, 1,000 overlapping jurisdictions, royal, noble, ecclesiastical, create a chaotic and often brutal reality for the common man. You are travelling to the court at Versailles, a palace of almost unimaginable splendour, a golden cage where the king has gathered the great nobility of France. This is the heart of the second difference. In the empire, the old nobility was either crushed or transformed into a class of urban administrators and investors centuries ago. In France, the aristocracy is still the dominant force in society. They have been stripped of their direct political power by the king, but they retain their immense landed wealth, their feudal privileges, and their total social dominance. The entire state is geared towards their service and the glorification of the monarch who rules them. This has created two Europes, a continent starkly divided by the Alps. South of the mountains lies the imperial core, a world that has evolved along a path of urban capitalism and bureaucratic administration. North of the mountains, particularly here in France and in the fractured German kingdoms, lies the peripheral aristocracy, a world where the structures of feudalism have calcified, overlaid with the glittering lacquer of royal absolutism. The unforeseen irony is that the very success and stability of the Italian Empire has reinforced this division. The Capetian kings of France, growing powerful in the absence of a German rival, never had to fully crush their own nobility in the way Berengar and his successors did. They co-opted them, bribed them, and centralized power at the top without fundamentally changing the feudal structure of the society below. France is a pyramid of personal loyalties, with the king at its apex. The empire is a grid, a rational system of interconnected bureaus and markets. The ethical tension of this division becomes clear to you as you navigate the treacherous currents of the French court. You are seeking a royal charter for your silk trade. In Milan, this would be a matter of submitting the correct forms, paying the required fees, and demonstrating the benefit of your enterprise to the imperial treasury. It would be a business transaction. Here at Versailles, it is a game of seduction and influence. You must bribe the right minister, flatter the correct duke, and perhaps procure a beautiful companion for a powerful bishop. Your success depends not on the economic merits of your proposal, but on your ability to play the intricate, corrupt, and deeply personal game of courtly power. This is a world governed by honor, prestige, and bloodlines, not by profit and loss. It is magnificent, and it is rotten. You see the consequences in the countryside. The French peasants are impoverished, crushed by a weight of taxes and feudal dues, designed to fund the king's wars and the nobility's extravagant lifestyles. In the empire, the peasantry is being transformed into a class of tenant farmers and wage labourers. Their obligations to the state regularized and codified. They are exploited, yes, but they are part of a dynamic economic system. Here, they are simply a resource to be squeezed dry. The military reflects the same divide. The French army is a superb instrument of the king's will, its aristocratic officers brave and dashing. But it is an army built on old principles of personal glory and hierarchical command. You have seen the Imperial army on parade in Turin. Its officers are promoted based on their knowledge of engineering and logistics, not on the quarterings of their coat of arms. They are professionals from the urban middle classes, the sons of merchants and bureaucrats. It is a conflict of two different worlds, and you suspect that in a direct confrontation, the machine would defeat the ornament. As you finally receive your charter, sealed with the king's own wax, you feel a sense of triumph, but also of unease. You have mastered the rules of this northern world, but you know it is a world living on borrowed time. South of the Alps is a society organized for efficiency, for production, for the rational management of resources. North of the Alps is a society organized for the glorification of a hereditary elite. The two Europes are not just a geographical reality. They are a temporal one. You have walked from a world that is recognizably of the 18th or even 19th century back into a world that is still, in its bones, of the 14th. The great explosion that must come will not be a peasant revolt against a distant king. It will be the collision of these two incompatible systems, a clash between the logic of the spreadsheet and the logic of the bloodline. The Alps are no longer just a mountain range. They are the precipice of a historical abyss. You are no longer a merchant. You are a ghost, a whisper in the halls of power, an observer unseen. You are standing in the city of Augusta Nova, the capital of the imperial province of Terra Augusta, and the air is thick with the humidity of late summer and the promise of a controlled, predictable future. The year is 1776. This city is not a boisterous, chaotic port like Boston or Philadelphia. It is a miniature Milan, a monument to rational planning, its streets laid out in a perfect grid, its heart, not a town common, but the vast, imposing marble plaza in front of the prefect's palace. There is no talk of revolution here. The very concept is alien, a madness that occasionally infects the French. There are no pamphlets arguing for the rights of man, no secret committees of correspondence, no fiery speeches in taverns. The printing presses of Augusta Nova, licensed and supervised by the Imperial Ministry of Culture, are busy printing agricultural almanacs, engineering manuals, and the latest edicts from Milan, translated into the local Quechuan and Nahuatl dialects for the assimilated native populations. The colonies of Terra Augusta are not a society of fractious farmers and independent merchants. They are a single, vast corporate enterprise, managed by a professional class of bureaucrats sent from the homeland. From the silver mines of the Potosi Mountains to the vast sugar plantations of the Caribbean islands, every aspect of production is regulated, taxed, and directed by the imperial bureaucracy. The wealth flows east, across the Atlantic, into the treasury at Milan, and in return, order flows west. Imperial legions, composed of professional soldiers, man the forts on the frontiers, protecting the province from hostile tribes. Imperial engineers design the roads and aqueducts that tie the vast territory together. Imperial jurists dispense the emperor's law, a single, unified code that applies to every subject, regardless of their origin. This is the absolutist New World. It is a society built on the principles of authority, hierarchy, and obedience. It has existed for almost 3 centuries, and the idea of self-governance is not just suppressed. It is unthinkable. Why would a citizen wish to govern himself when the state provides security, stability, and a clear, predictable path for his life? The highest ambition for a bright young colonial is not to become a rebellious legislator, but to win a scholarship to the University of Bologna and return as a respected member of the Imperial Civil Service. The unexpected twist is the profound stasis this system has created. The New World is peaceful, prosperous, and productive, but it is not innovative. The agricultural techniques are the ones dictated by the Imperial Ministry of Agriculture, perfected for efficiency, but slow to adapt. The social structure is rigid, a pyramid with the Italian-born prefects at the top, the colonial administrative class below them, and the vast mass of assimilated native and imported African labourers at the bottom. There is no churn, no chaotic energy of a frontier society. This is not a new world being born. It is an old world being perfectly replicated. And here lies the final, chilling ethical tension. This world has avoided the horrors that shaped the Americas of our history. There was no genocide on the scale of the Anglo-American frontier wars. The empire saw the native population as a taxable resource to be managed, not a barrier to be removed. There was no chattel slavery as practiced in the British colonies, a system that stripped people of their very humanity. The empire utilized a system of indentured labor, the corvée augusta, which was brutal and exploitative, but which recognized its subjects as humans with certain, albeit limited, legal standings. The wars of independence, with their bloodshed and chaos, have never happened. This world is, by many measures, more orderly, more stable, and perhaps even more humane. But it is a world without liberty. It is a world where the concepts of individual rights, of government by consent of the governed, of the very idea of revolution as a legitimate act of political will, have never taken root. These ideas were born in our world from a specific set of circumstances: a British legal tradition of common law and parliamentary rights, the intellectual ferment of the Enlightenment in a fragmented Europe, and the friction between a free-thinking colonial population and a distant, distracted metropole. None of those conditions exist here. You drift north, across the continent. You see the lands that would have been the United States. They are a sparsely populated wilderness, a buffer zone between the northern territories of the Norman English kingdom, a cold, feudal society focused on its European rivalries, and the northernmost outposts of the Italian Empire. There is no Philadelphia, no Continental Congress, no Jefferson drafting a declaration of inalienable rights. The philosophical fire that would ignite a world revolution was never lit, because the tinder of a free-thinking, self-governing colonial society was never allowed to accumulate. The year 1776 passes, and it is just another year in the imperial calendar. The prefect of Augusta Nova sends his annual report to Milan. Silver production is up by 3%. A minor revolt in the southern territories was efficiently suppressed. A new aqueduct for the city is on schedule to be completed. The report is filed away in the vast imperial archives, another testament to the eternal, unchanging, and absolute order of things. The great experiment of liberty, the radical and dangerous idea that ordinary people could govern themselves, has been averted. The future of this continent is not to be a beacon of a new kind of politics, but to be a permanent, productive, and obedient child of the old Roman world. The absolutism of the empire has not just crossed the ocean, it has filled the horizon, leaving no room for the messy, chaotic, and glorious idea of freedom to even be imagined. And so, the river of time flows into a different sea. We stand on the bank and watch it pass, this strange, familiar, and yet utterly alien world. Is it better? Is it worse? The question itself is a trap, a product of our own timeline's obsession with progress and judgment. This world did not progress, it endured. It did not have a renaissance, but it never truly had a dark age. It avoided the cataclysm of the Reformation's religious wars, but in doing so, it smothered the very idea of the individual conscience. It built a new world in its own image, a world of order and stability, but it was a world where the word liberty remained a philosopher's abstraction, a footnote in a translated Greek text. This is the ultimate trade-off, the central irony of the Verona Gambit. The survival of one man, the success of his vision for a unified Roman state, created a world of profound stability. It is a world without the 30 Years' War, without the Street Bartholomew's Day massacre, without the genocidal horrors of the New World conquests. But this peace, this order, was purchased at a terrible price. The cost was the chaotic, brilliant, and often violent fragmentation of our own history. The very fragmentation that gave rise to the competition, the innovation, the revolutions in science, art, and politics that define our age. They built a magnificent, enduring cage and convinced the inhabitants it was a palace. What was lost? Not just the voices of Luther, or Locke, or Jefferson. What was lost was the very possibility of them. The great engine of Western history in our world was the perpetual, irresolvable conflict between church and state, between pope and emperor. It was in the cracks between these two great powers that cities learned to be free, that parliaments learned to bargain, and that philosophers learned to question everything. In this world, that crack was sealed in the 10th century. There was only one power, a monolithic fusion of the temporal and the divine, and in its shadow the beautiful, dangerous weeds of dissent could never grow. This alternate history is not a tragedy of collapse, but a tragedy of success. It is the story of a dream, fulfilled the dream of a restored Roman Empire, and the quiet nightmare that came with it.